pleased to start right now, and I have the privilege of introducing to you Father John Jacobs, and I'm going to read a little bit about him. But one of the first things that I learned about him was that, as some of you know, I was born in Brazil, but I've been in California for 30 years. But sometimes when people say, "Oh, you're from Brazil," and I said, "Yeah, but I've been in California for 30 years." But that kind of, they say, "Oh, this guy just came from Brazil." Thank you. And but I'm saying this to say that one of the first things that I learned about him is that decades ago he was in my hometown in Rio, working as a missionary in the very poor areas. Rio is a big city that has, like big cities, areas that are very cosmopolitan, and you have the beaches, but then you have the favelas, which are very poor areas. And Father John was there doing the work of the Lord there. So it's already something that tells us a little bit about his heart. He was very young and serving the Lord in those places, which is not easy work because of, as I said, that tells us already about his heart for the Lord and the service of the Lord. So Father John Jacobs had the blessing to be Elder Ephraim's translator during hundreds of confessions. He will share with us his time with Elder Ephraim and the various transformative encounters that he witnessed during Elder Ephraim's annual visits to his parish in Pittsburgh. He came from Pittsburgh. Father John will also relay how, with the blessing of the late Metropolitan Maximus of Pittsburgh, the elder's vision of establishing the Athonite monastery in North America how that came to fruition, and subsequently how the elder was instrumental in establishing many more monasteries throughout the United States and Canada, including the famous monastery of St. Anthony in Flores, Arizona. I hope all of you had a chance to visit there, or if not, you will have the chance to visit that blessed monastery in the future. So, please, without further ado, Father John Jacobs.
Thank you very much. Move a little bit because a little bit of sun there.
How's that?
That's good. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Great. It's really always a blessing to be here. This is my third visit to your parish. I was here not too long ago for a talk during, I believe it was during Lent. And then a previous time I was here during COVID, so I didn't see too many of you. There were very few people. We didn't have a reception afterwards, but it's good to be here. Always a blessing. And thank you for inviting me, the committee that's involved with setting up these programs. So here I'm going to talk to you about my spiritual father for many years, Elder Ephraim, originally of the monastery of Philotheo on Mount Athos, and later, of course, known to us here in America as the Yeronda of the monastery in Arizona, but also the Yeronda of all the monasteries that he founded. The first of which was in the Pittsburgh area, and that's the one where he and I collaborated together with Bishop Maximus to get that movement started. But what I'm going to do today is try to share with you some experiences during this early session in the morning that I had with him that allowed me to see how he worked with people and his effect on them, and some of the what I would call rather miraculous occurrences, transformative encounters that he had with people. And then later on, I'm going to go over some of the teachings that he has that are from the book that that the monks put together of his talks. And I have some papers, you see them on your tables there, with some kind of like a compilation of a few teachings of his from the book on certain topics. But I'm going to begin in talking about him with my first encounter and what evolved out of that. I heard about him back in the early 80s, but I had never met him. And a dear friend of mine, also a clergyman, who was very close with Elder Ephraim, who had been going to Canada for health reasons, he told me about him. I said, "Oh, this is really something." He said, "And I've invited him to my parish." And his parish was in York, Pennsylvania. So myself and some other clergy decided to pay a visit. So we drove about 4 hours to the parish. And when we got there, the church was filled with people waiting to hear Father Ephraim to hear their confessions. So he escorted us into the room where the elder was so we could get his blessing. And the very first thing that he did, just like, threw me for a loop, because as soon as he saw me, he almost fell on his knees and he went to kiss my hand. I said, what are you doing? I should be kissing your hand. But it was so fast that it kind of threw me off guard. I said, well, what kind of a person is this? That kind of humility. So I got a little frightened by that from the beginning. When you meet somebody like that for the first time, you don't know what to make of them, how to respond, because it's just kind of an overwhelming experience. But anyway, we go inside, we talk to him a little bit, and one of the clergymen who was there with me, a very dear friend of mine, sadly was going through a separation that ultimately led to divorce from his wife. Now, the elder didn't know any of us, but he looked to that priest and he said, the priests have to be united with their wives. So he picked up right away. No one said anything to him about it in advance. He picked it up right away. I said, oh, uh-oh. And the priest, my friend, said, oh, he knows. He already knows. So that was my first kind of like awakening to the spiritual gifts that he had. So anyway, what I found was, upon first seeing him, that, he appears to be someone, he's very small in stature. He has a very, feminine sounding voice. He's, real short, as I said. And but yet you could feel coming from him a power, a grace, a presence. And his main qualities that I detected were like the simplicity of the man, very gentle, very kind. And the best thing that I could say about him is he was like a child, like talking to a child, if you can think about it. Now, I found out later that he was not, shall we say, ignorant as a child, but he was very perceptive, but in other ways. But definitely a man who was uncorrupted by the world. He grew up in a pious family on the mother's side. His mother, by the way, was the one that really had the greatest influence on him. His father was not a religious man, and only with force from time to time they would drag him to church. And he was not in favor ever of his son becoming a monk. But the mother was praying at night, and he would see his mother, and he learned from her, and they ended up having the same spiritual father. So behind his eyes, I would see another aspect, a very penetrating gaze. He seems to know things about a person that are very private, but he handled them in a very respectful manner, with a lot of love. So, after meeting him and going to see him for confession, I invited him, with the blessing of my bishop, Maximus, to come to my parish. So my first visit was in October of 1982. So we're going back about 43 years now. So he came to Pittsburgh, came to my parish, and the word got out, and all these people wanted to see the elder. They heard he was from Mount Athos, he's a confessor. And at that time, there was no talk of starting monasteries in America. Basically, he was coming just to hear the confessions of people. Now, on one of the papers that I passed out to you on your thing there, I just wanted to give you an idea of the elder's desire to come to America. He gave a talk to his monks on Mount Athos in 1985 about his reasons for going to America, because it was not a very popular move among the monastic communities of Mount Athos. In fact, they even wrote letters asking him not to go. They felt it would be like the worst thing he could do, because I don't know if you're aware of the fact, but for a monk to leave his monastery is considered like spiritual suicide. Once you're in a monastery, you're supposed to stay there. You're never supposed to go anywhere else. But he had this desire to go out. And at his monastery, historically, there was another famous monastic missionary. Some of you may have heard of him. He was famous in the Balkan countries and in Greece. You know, he actually resided at the same monastery as Ephraim for 17 years, but he also had this fire inside of him to go out. Cosmas Etelos, Saint Cosmas. So after 17 years, Cosmas went out, and he spent the rest of his life going to villages throughout Greece and in the Balkan countries, asking people to stay firm in their faith and to not lose their heritage, their language, and culture. So that was the impetus behind Ephraim's inspiration, was that elder, was Father Cosmas. And in fact, I was told, not only by him, but others that knew him, that he had an encounter with St. Cosmas. And he asked him, what should I do about going to America? Well, what would you expect another missionary to tell someone who wanted to be a missionary? Of course, he told him, go. So he told us all about these things. He would tell us, share these things with us. He's very open about it. So he came to my parish. And what happened? Oh my goodness, the things that happened. People just like saw him, and it was like a big magnet just kind of sucking you in. And wherever he would go, people would be following him. Can we have your blessing? It was, that kind of a grace that drew people to him. Now, during those years that he would come to my parish, he would hear confessions, and then in the evening, he would have a talk, and he would speak to the people on various themes that he had in mind. So I'm going to share with you a couple things. In one of the evenings, one of the earlier encounters, I could see he was very tired, and I was sitting next to him, and I was his translator. So I'm sitting next to him, and I see him kind of like, he's fading a little bit. He's getting a little, down, in terms of his strength, because he's been up early in the morning, because he always maintained his monastic rule, always. So he would get up in the middle of the night and pray, and when it was time for, whatever monastic disciplines he would follow, he would do those always, wherever he would go. He never stopped doing what he was supposed to do as a monk. But anyway, one of the occasions that I want to share with you, where he was giving a talk, and I was noticing that he was beginning to bend over, and you can see he was kind of tired. And there was a Greek man in the audience at our parish hall there. And I could tell by looking at this man, I didn't know who he was, but I could see he was very troubled. Very, very troubled. He was, his body language, his face, everything showed this discomfort at being there. So finally, toward the end of the talk, the Greek man raises his hand, and he says, Father Ephraim, I'm not a believer, I'm an atheist. Is there something that you could tell me about God that would help me, and I could go speak to my friends who also are the same way as I am, that is, not believing? And then I'm sitting next to Father Ephraim, and then all of a sudden, it's like a power went into him, and he kind of like, his energy level just skyrocketed up. I don't know, to a very high degree. And then he presented this beautiful description on God, creator of the universe. And he gave this kind of analogy to an architect who built this beautiful facility. And we know that there is a architect behind it because someone had to make the plan and do this. So he explained this to the Greek man, and it was quite effective. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful presentation that he made. So after he explained that to the man, Father Ephraim looked to me and quietly said to me, if he comes tomorrow, let him come in first, whenever he comes. So, okay. I don't know what was going on, but I said, I You don't mess around when they tell you something like that. So sure enough, he showed up the next day. I put him right in there, and he was in there for a long time. He came out bawling like a baby. And I was amazed. But there's more to the story, a lot more to the story, and I want you to hear this. So apparently he'd confessed, and he was brought back into the faith. And a few months later, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, this man. So the word got out about him being there, and they called the parish priest to go see him. So the priest went there, but he was in a kind of a comatose state. But then he brought the gifts to commune him with, and he woke up and he communed, and then he fell back asleep again. And then more time passed, a little more time, maybe a few more days. It was coming toward his end, and just before he died, he got up out of the bed, he stood up, and he chanted the doxology. Got back in bed and he died. What did the elder see in that man that made him say, if he comes to church, send him in first? That's one example. There are many others I can tell you. There was another case. There was a phone call in the middle of one of his talks. They wanted to see the elder because there was a parishioner who was very sick. She had cancer, but it was thought that she wasn't ready to go right away, but she was wondering if maybe we could bring the elder over to the house. And, because since it wasn't critical, it wasn't like, she was ready to die, my message was, well, I'll see if he wants to go or not. So when the talk was over, I went to the elder and I said, well, we had this call, but it's not urgent, we can wait. He says, we have to go now. Oh, I said, okay. And we got lost trying to find the house. But we eventually found the house. He goes in, he hears the woman's confession, and he goes to me in Greek, "Inetimi," she's ready. Oh, I said, I know, but she's been okay. I've given her communion before. He said, no, you've got to go see her right away. A couple of days later, she was gone. Just like that, bang. Another example. I can tell you story upon story upon story. Now, in the introduction that I have here on your paper here, one of his visits, he went to Hawaii. You can read this in more detail. And when he got to this church in Hawaii, I guess it was Honolulu, the parish there, he noticed that they had a chanter who was Chinese. But he wasn't Orthodox. But he knew some Greek because he was married to a Greek woman. So the elder asked the parish priest, he said, why do you have someone who's not Orthodox chanting the services? And the parish priest said, well, we don't have anybody here, He said, well, let me talk to him. So he took the man aside, he talked to him, he confessed him, he became Orthodox, and then he got very sick also. He was hospitalized, and he died as an Orthodox Christian. So my mother went to see him for confession back in those days. And my mother goes in there, she has her confession, she comes out, and he goes to me, "Imitera su ineetimi." I got scared. After everything that I'd heard about him, I said, "Imitera mu ineetimi." My mother's ready. So I told my mother, he said, "You're ready." What does he mean? We thought, well, that meant she wasn't going to be around much longer, But my mother lived to almost 99, so she got through that. But that's an example of some of the encounters that we had, all of which were very, very transformative. But there's more. I want to share with you then, as a result of the initial visit, he invited a group of us to come to Mount Athos. I had never been to Mount Athos. I didn't know what it was like. I'd heard about it. But in those early 80s and the late 70s, people weren't going to Mount Athos. In fact, Mount Athos for a long time was on the decline. They weren't even sure if it was going to stay open. It was down to a few hundred monks. And most of them in the monasteries were They were elderly monks, just kind of holding down the fort, and it didn't appear as though it was going to last much longer. But with people like Elder Ephraim, things began to change. So can I do the next slide? Sure. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is the elder Joseph, Saint Joseph, the Hesychast. He was the spiritual father to Elder Ephraim and to a number of other monks in his little party, his little group, synodia, they call it. And almost all of them have been recognized as saints now, of the people that were under him. He was like they call him in Athos Papuli, the grandfather. So he was the one that was kind of like taught them how to say the Jesus prayer, taught them how to live an ascetical life. And he created the fire, he instituted or instigated the fire in these people to do what they did. And Father Ephraim would tell me that his spiritual father was really hard on him, and he was his constitution was very frail. So he would have him fasting, sleeping on floors, doing prostrations, but it was really hard. And he would also humiliate him a lot. He would say things to him, to kind of like put him down. And they do that, by the way. It wasn't meant to be sort of like, a put down to hurt the person. The idea was to strengthen them in their humility. But behind his back, he would say, he said, this monk is going to be something in the future. So Elder Ephraim, with the blessing of his spiritual father, became a spiritual father in his own right. And when I met him in 82, he had helped to repopulate 4 monasteries that are thriving even to this day. So he was a spiritual father to 4 different ones. And other monasteries and other communities in Greece were asking him to also take over and become like a spiritual father. So he also became a spiritual father to a number of convents as well in Greece, some of which I did visit. And wherever I went to any of those convents, I met very, very holy women. And, there's a lot I can say about them. They were just phenomenal people. But he had that touch that when he had someone being under his spiritual care, he was able to inspire and bring out the best in them in a spiritual sense. So this was certainly very, very obvious to me. And during these early years of his coming to our parish, he started talking a lot about starting Athonite monasteries in America. I believe you have one here close by. I don't know what the name of this. Holy Trinity, yeah. We have ours in Pittsburgh, the first one that started, and there's a whole story behind that I'll share with you shortly. But in any event, Elder Ephraim had this kind of an influence, and when he would bring someone to start a monastery, he would always send his best people, 1 or 2, 3 at the most. But they were like high quality, very spiritually strong people. And even though many of them were not fluent in Greek or spoke in English and spoke no language other than Greek, yet just their mere presence was sort of like an extension of him, and people could feel that and see that. So the first Athonite monastery in the United States was in the greater Pittsburgh area in a little town called Saxonburg, about 50 minutes from the downtown Pittsburgh area. And he sent us this beautiful, beautiful person from his monastery. Let me see, you can get the next slide? Oh, is that the one that's there? Was there one? Okay. I have to tell you this story first. Okay, sorry. So anyway, we had our visit to Mount Athos. I told you about that. So I don't know if any of you can see there's a priest there. Can you see it? Sort of looks like me. Kind of hard to tell. I was a lot younger in those days. But anyway, we went there for the first time. It was like, it was like being strangers in paradise. We loved it, but we didn't feel like we really belonged there, because it was just so holy. And at night, when the monks were in their cells, the monastery sounded like a beehive. You could hear blah, 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 for hours. And they were all saying the Jesus prayer. It was like buzzing throughout the whole monastery. And I was, at first I didn't know what the noise was. And then I asked and they said, oh, they're all praying the Jesus prayer. And that was one of their disciplines, to say the Jesus prayer. They would get up in the middle of the night before matins and before the liturgy, and they would have their canona, their prayer roll that they would say. So anyway, on it was April the 7th of 1983. We were there for the feast day of the Annunciation on the old calendar, because their church, the main church in the complex of the monastery, was named after the Annunciation. So on Mount Athos, what happens is they invite all the monasteries to send a delegation to be part of the celebration. That's kind of typical, where they just go from one church to the other, depending on who's celebrating the feast day. So they came for the vigil, would be an all-night vigil, and I'd never seen anything so beautiful. They brought the best chanters from all over Mount Athos, and you put them all together, and they're all chanting the vigil at night, and then they went from that into the orthros, and then they went into the liturgy. It was just like sublime. So meanwhile, I'm sitting in one of the stands there, one of the stasi, they call it, and the elder comes up to me. He said, "Come on inside to the altar." I really got a little scared. I didn't feel that I should go in there. But no, he said, you can go. So, okay. So I went in there. They had vestments for me. And so there are all these clergy in there. And we're there to celebrate the feast day. And we're getting into the liturgy. And at the same time, when all this is going on with the beautiful chanting, there was an icon in the church that was exuding myrrh. And the whole church was filled with the smell of this fragrance of an icon of the Theotokos that had been brought by another person. And so this is part of the celebration. So there we are in this service, and it comes time for the great entrance. So the elder comes over to me, and he brings the bishop's crown. He says, I want you to take it. And I'm thinking, why does he want me to take the bishop's crown? I don't know what the practices were at that time. This is all very strange to me. And I was somewhat perplexed. But he said, no, you take it, you go out, and you give it to the bishop. That was part of the great entrance. So I took the crown, we followed along, and as I'm leaving the altar and coming into the main part of the church, a thought enters my brain. That's a vain thought, if I can put it that way. Gee, I wish I had a photograph of this. I think we've all had those moments where we want to catch something, that's kind of a special moment. So the thought went in my mind, then it went away. Service continued. We got to the point of the invocation of the Holy Spirit. And then all of a sudden, the fathers in there, the various priest monks that were in there, and there were quite a few of them, they all started weeping profusely. And I said, what's going on here? And I was hoping I could find a back door out of the altar, so I could sneak out of there, because I realized, I don't really belong here. This is too heavy for me. These people are like, they're mainlining on the Orthodox faith, and we come in like beggars, and looking for a few crumbs of grace. And these guys are like, openly expressing their faith in such an emotional way. It was kind of overwhelming. And in fact, there was so much weeping going on that I can tell you that the floor was wet with their tears. That's how much they were crying. I had never seen anything like this in my life. Usually when the priests get together in this country, we start talking about other things. Well, how did the Steelers do in the game the other day? Things like that. We get very world, or how's your family, or what are you doing now, and things like that. But there it was like very intense, very, very intense. So the service is over, and they have they call it kerasma, a little like a snack, after the liturgy. And we go into this big room, and all the guests are there, and they're all sitting, and nobody's talking. Nobody. How unlike our coffee hours this is. I couldn't believe it. They were so caught up in the feelings from the liturgy that they could not express themselves in any other way than to be quiet. And I went back to my room that they had staying in, and I said, what just happened here? So I opened up my Bible. It was, I had it there, and the first thing that my eyes fell upon was when Peter, James, and John ascended Mount Tabor. And I said, I've just been to Mount Tabor with these holy people. Finishing up the story of that encounter, 2 months later, I get a letter in the mail from Mount Athos. No name on the letter other than the envelope. I took out a photograph, and that's the one you see here. Wow. Of me with the other monks there. Who could have known that I was thinking that I wanted to have that photograph? But they sent it to my house. And those are the kinds of things that happen, with these holy people. Some back here, okay. But there's more, a lot more. I'm only touching the surface, just to let you know some of the things. So, we come back from Mount Athos. We develop a relationship with the Holy Father. He starts talking to us about monasteries. And that's why I had told you in the introduction of the teachings of the elder Ephraim that you have in front of you on your table, that's when he began explaining to the monks why he wanted to go to America. Because he said, the people there are lost. No one's going to confession. People are going to communion without ever preparing or fasting. It's sort of like a free-for-all. And when you're from Mount Athos, I call it the Bureau of Standards. Mount Athos is the Bureau of Standards for the Orthodox Church. Obviously, we don't always live up to the standards, but we know what they are because they maintain it. So when you go there, they're very strict, but for the reasons of keeping the faith in its purest form and the purest expression, keeping it alive. So anyway, we begin to develop this relationship with the elder, and after his initial visits, we begin to talk more about the possibility of establishing a monastic presence in the United States of Anathonite variety. I know there have always been other monasteries, no question about it. It's not that we don't have them. We have them even to this day. They're from other backgrounds, but none had ever come from the Holy Mountain. So these trips that we had then gave us a taste of what it was like, and the monks on Mount Athos were really shocked and amazed at how much time the elder was spending with us, the group of 10 of us that went. Why is he spending so much time with them? He never hardly even talks to us. And yet he's going out of his way to take care of these people. What's he up to? And that's when they were beginning to suspect that something was going on here, because he was reaching out to us so much. So we didn't realize that in his mind he had a vision that he would like to go to America. And because of the things that he saw there, he would like to start monasteries. And so you can go to the next slide. That's my beloved former bishop of a blessed memory. He passed away in 2020. He is the one that opened the door for Father Ephraim and the monasteries to begin. He opened the door. And we began a process of dialogue with him to see if it would be possible for us to establish monastic communities in America. So I'd like to share with you an encounter that I had with the elder. And this occurred, and I kept notes all along throughout the years. I have a lot of notes of times that we met. So this was July the 6th, 1989. I went to the home of a newly tonsured nun. Her name is Ephraim, in Pittsburgh. And they were hosting Elder Ephraim at their house. And he had come to Pittsburgh to install the abbess, Taxiarchia, of blessed memory, to be the spiritual mother of the monastery. So this was a remarkable encounter. uplifting indeed, and historic for the Greek Orthodox Church in America. This was the beginning of the fledgling monastic community, Ephraimia and Taxiarchia, these two nuns. They would be the first of the many nuns who eventually would come to live out their lives in monasteries of America. I could not help but notice on that first day when I went to the house that Father Ephraim exuded a palpable joy and a great deal of confidence, more so than on previous meetings that he had had when he was a confessor at my parish. So he was very enthusiastic, and I wondered, what's going on here? Why is he so, deliriously happy? And then he shared with me what was making him so happy. After I embraced him, then he proceeded to relate to me the blessed events of the past week. You need to know that before all of this encounter that I had in 1989 with him, there was a tremendous amount of resistance to him and his presence and his ministry and his vision of starting monasteries. The hierarchy, with the exception of my bishop, were all against it. They didn't want him to come anywhere near America. They wanted him to go back and stay there. His monks and all the monasteries in Mount Athos wrote a letter. They said the same thing. They felt it would be spiritual suicide for him to come to America and to start monasteries. So they were against it too. So he was like pretty much alone, getting all of these people against him. And so he had a tremendous amount of anguish about what he was to do. So he told me that in his prayers, he had struggled diligently with the forces that seemed to be at enmity with his mission of creating an Athonite form of monasticism, both in Canada as well as in the United States. Initially, he confessed to me, he said that he was very, very dejected and emotionally drained as a result of the personal attacks against him. And there were a lot of attacks. I saw some of them. They were pretty ugly. He told me that he had implored God to give him a sign that the intended work was blessed. And so he related to me that no answer was forthcoming despite many tearful prayers. Finally, when he was in Athens, and he had just come from there, while he was in Athens the previous week, he was going to see my bishop, who was also in Athens at the same time. And the elder Ephraim told me that there had been a major breakthrough. The Yeronda was given to know while he was entering a taxi cab that he was headed in the right direction regarding his heartfelt aspirations. It just came upon him like an inspiration. His interaction with Metropolitan Maximus bore out this intuition, and Maximus would intercede on behalf of the Archbishop of America at that time, Iakovos. On behalf of the elder, he would intercede for him. Now, besides this encounter in Athens, Father Ephraim received many other encouraging signs along the way, both through his prayers and through those of his spiritual children, and that further advanced his hopes for establishing the monasteries. But most impressive of all, and this is what I want to share with you, that what happened with me when I was with him. He had a visit with now Saint Porphyrios. Some of you have heard of you. How many have heard of Saint Porphyrios? Okay, just about everybody. Incredible, incredible spiritual father. So Elder Ephraim went to see Porphyrios, and he told me what happened. He wanted to go to see him. So he already knew why Yeronda Ephraim had come to see him even before the visit had begun. And he encouraged him to continue his labor in America. And this is what Porphyrios prophesied. Porphyrios said, and this is what Father Ephraim told me. He said that by means of the monasteries that would be found in America, there will be another Pentecost. That's pretty heavy stuff. You think about that. So Porphyrios, elaborating further on this prophetic inspiration, went so far as to say that people would sell their possessions to promote this mission. So Saxonburg, which is where our first monastery that he started is, became especially blessed. And as the elder spoke, as he was talking to me, I detected a very sweet-smelling fragrance in the room. And suddenly, when he told me these things, the room filled with like smell of incense. I was left with the distinct impression that all would unfold according to God's will. And so I prayed at that time, may it be so. And so it has taken place. We now have 17 Athonite monasteries, 2 in Canada, 15 in the United States. They're all thriving. People are coming. People are selling their homes and they're moving close to the monasteries. Just for example, in California, the Life-Giving Font, they have about 100 families living around the monastery. They've moved there. If you go to Arizona, Arizona has so many people that have moved there that are part of that community. Even in Pittsburgh, where we are, we're seeing, again, people coming and supporting the monastery. And I don't know where the money's coming from, but they have no trouble raising funds. None whatsoever. People are just coming and giving money. And this has been happening all along. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, I wanted to show you that's Father Ephraim, and that's my daughter, Maria. But she's 49 now. At that time, she was only like about 12 years old. He would go and visit homes after the evening of fellowship when he gave his talks and the confessions, and we would all gather at somebody's home, and he would continue to talk to us. But on one particular night, I want to share with you what happened. It was kind of like really quite remarkable. I call it a night of paschal joy. So, this was in November of 1987. After the visit, we gathered at the home of one of our parishioners. And we gathered in the living room. And this is one of those nights here. After the evening fellowship at the church, we withdrew to her home. And our late evening meal, men in one room, and they still do it that way in Mount Athos, and women in the other, we returned to the family room, and lo, what happened? We're waiting for the elder to talk about something, because he would always have a little topic that he would share with us with those kinds of encounters. But for some reason or other, he decided not to do that. He started singing hymns of the church. He had a lot of joy in him. He started singing one after the other. We all started singing with him. And then he sang, this is now in, not around the Paschal season, Christos Anesti. He's singing with joy. His heart was filled. He just kept singing and singing. And I said, this is unbelievable. Instead of talking, he's expressing the joy by singing. And that night was just so remarkable for the feelings that he elicited from all of us, this feeling of joy. And I said, wow, who could have ever expected something like that? But that's the way he was. He could just, on a moment's notice, he could do something that at the initial kind of like intellectual understanding of it, you say, well, why is he doing this? We're waiting to hear him talk. No, but he knew that this was what needed to happen at that time. So these are just a few experiences of the many that I had with him. I just wanted to share some of those with you to let you know what it was like to be with him. And over the course of the years, of course, the other monasteries began to be founded. And you can go to the next slide now. All right, here, I want to talk about these two people. How many of you have heard of Yeronisa Macrina? How many? Okay, you need to know about her. She is something else. She's the mother of all the nuns that came to America. She was the one that they were part of her group. She was like a walking spiritual house. Macrina. In fact, there's a book that's been translated into English. It's Words from the Heart. I don't know if you might have it in your bookstore or might want to consider ordering it. It's beautiful, beautiful. But her story is just overwhelming. But she was a spiritual daughter of Elder Joseph. And then eventually, when Elder Joseph passed away, Father Ephraim became spiritual father. She's the one behind it all. Like in terms of, she's like on equal, on par with Father Ephraim. And I visited her a couple times, and she even came to my parish to be a godmother for one of our parishioners. She had promised years ago that she was going to go, and he was an adult. He wasn't Orthodox, but he was an adult, and she was going to be Dimitris Nona. And she came to my parish, and again, that was another Pentecost. She was just an overwhelming presence, and she also was clairvoyant. She had the gifts, and so she was another one of the people behind that. But among her group of women that she had a lot of influence over, first and foremost is Taxiarchia, who is to her right. She was sent to Pittsburgh, and she was the first abbess to come from that tradition into America. She didn't live very long when she came. She lived another 5 years. She had very serious, all kinds of health issues, craniotomies, mastectomies. She had a really bad heart. She had a rheumatoid fever as a child. She had like open heart surgery 3 times. In fact, one of the famous doctors, Denton Cooley in Houston, had done one of her surgeries. But she was such a holy person in and of herself. And she's the one that laid the foundation for the first monastery. With the women, that's the one that where I was involved in terms of getting it moving in the Pittsburgh area. But when she passed away, it was just unbelievable. Her relics were, her body was laid out, and they couldn't bury her right away because they were waiting for her brother and sister to come from Greece for the funeral. But there was a strike with Olympic Airlines. So they couldn't get a flight to come right away. So she died on the 3rd of August, but we had to wait because, they don't embalm or anything like that. And there she was laid out in the monastery. And, during the time that she was laid out, we noticed these little beads were forming on her face. And we were so, what is this? Little beads, and they were like fragrant. We began to brush it off, and there was a presbytera there who had this, for months, had this really bad skin condition, and her body was covered with these lesions. So they took some of the cotton that had been blessed from what had come off Yorondis's face, and they blessed her with it. The rashes went away. One example, there are many more. There was another occasion when you've heard of the miraculous icon of Our Lady of Ephraim. I don't know if it's ever come to your parish or not. From Hawaii, also exudes myrrh. And it's based in Hawaii, but he travels all over, the person at that time. So he had come to our monastery with the icon, but then during the liturgy, he got very sick. So he went down into the trapeza, into the refectory downstairs, and his stomach was really bothering him. And a nun came up to him, and she gave him a glass of water to help him. So he drank the water, felt better, and he went upstairs. And at the end of the liturgy, he thanked the abbess. Well, thank you for sending the nun down to give me that water because it really helped me a lot. She said, I didn't send anybody down there. He said, are you sure? No, nobody went down. I didn't send anybody down. We were all in the liturgy. And he's looking around, and who could it have been? And they have a big picture of Yorondis Taxiarchia on the wall in the narthex of the chapel. And he looked up here, that's the one that came and gave me the water. Things like that are going on quite a bit. I can tell you other miracles as well. I wanted to share a couple with you. So her relics are now, blessing a lot of people at our monastery. There is a book that will come out in the not too distant future that will tell the story of Yanonisa Taxiarchia and what's happening there. But there are others too. She's not the only one. I just want you to know the kind of people, the quality of people that are coming and the effect that they're having wherever they go. So it's been a real blessing. So maybe now that I've shared with you a little bit, you can go to the next slide. This is really a very sweet thing here. This is Elder Ephraim with his mother. I told you before, she was a very holy woman in her own right, and she had great influence on her son. And when they exhumed her remains, they were all fragrant, gave off the myrrh of sanctity. Her name was Theophano. You can go to the next one. This is the chapel that has now been constructed in Arizona, where the remains of Elder Ephraim have been laid to rest. On the top floor is they have the church part, but down beneath there's kind of like a lower level where they have his remains in a sarcophagus. And I don't know when they're going to open it up, but it's been 6 years since he passed away. I think it'll be 6 years in December. Yeah, 6 years. You can go to the next one. So this is the elder in repose at his funeral. Thousands upon thousands of people came, and they came from all over the world to be there for his funeral. And I know there were many because the caterer is a good friend of mine. He told me how many meals he prepared. He was originally from the Pittsburgh area, but he moved there. He was one of those that moved to Arizona to be near his spiritual father. So these are just a few impressions that I wanted to share with you at this point in time. Maybe if you have some questions, we can open it up a little bit here. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm happy to share with you whatever is on your mind or talk to you about it, to let you know what a big impact this man has had. Spoke no English, very slight in stature, very unassuming in appearance, and yet wherever he would go, he was like a magnet, and people would just like be glued to him. They couldn't get away from him. Everybody wanted his blessing. And there's so many stories of the effect that he has had throughout this country. And also, Greece has a number of monasteries that he helped to found, the 17 here in Canada and the United States. So how could that have been done unless it was by the grace of God? And so that's the story of Elder Ephraim and some of my personal encounters with him that I wanted to share with all of you. Thank you. I'll do that. I'll repeat the question. Sure, yeah. Yes.
Could you speak more on the topic of more and more people are flocking to the monasteries?
Yes.
And what does that mean exactly? And more so, what does it mean for our worldly churches? Do you think there will be impact?
Okay, so the question is, what does it mean that so many people are flocking to the monasteries? And what does that mean for our, you use the word worldly churches, yeah. Hopefully not in a bad sense. Yeah. But churches that are more like, like we are. Well, it's kind of a two-edged sword. It's good in the sense that people are finding their faith and living it in a deeper, more committed way. That's the good part of it. Because the monasteries, in the words of the Elder Ephraim, they're like the lighthouses for the church. Anywhere you have monasticism, people are energized by that, and it's good to have monasteries. We didn't have in our Greek Orthodox Church these kinds of monasteries before. But now that we do have them, I'm finding, even as a parish priest, that more and more of my parishioners have been energized and become more committed to the faith. So that's the good part. The part that is viewed as not so good is the fact that more and more people are going there, but they just keep going there and they don't go to their own churches, and so they become more sort of kind of taking away. And this causes some concern that our communities are not able to retain them with the same fervor that the people now have now that they're going to these other places. So it's got a little bit of both. So it's created a bit of contention between, let's say, you're trying to pay your bills. You have this beautiful complex here, but if all of you all of a sudden became monastery groupies, what would happen? You're the committed core of people. You've come here to this talk because it's something that you're interested in, and you have this desire to be close to Christ, and the monasteries are feeding you with this opportunity to experience your faith in a deeper way. And you want this also for your community. So if you're not going to be here and when you're going there, that would be an issue. But hopefully you'll do both. You'll be committed to visiting the monasteries, but then at the same time you'll bring the fire of the faith filled with the Holy Spirit back into your local parish and influence more people that way. So what is it that we need to think about then? It's obviously taking our faith very seriously. What I find in the monasteries, they're making saints. The number one goal of the monastery, the monastic communities that I visited, that I've come to know, that were founded by Elder Ephraim, and I'm sure others as well, they're in the business of making saints, period. They have no other agenda. And so they're very strict in what they ask of us. And it's hard. I have to tell you, it's hard to do what they're saying. Because, yes, I want to follow Christ fully, but I also want to root for the Steelers because I'm from Pittsburgh. You want to root for the Lions because you're from Detroit. You want the Tigers to win the World Series, You want to go to the mall and hang out with your friends and have a coffee or go to a nice restaurant at night. You want to go to the stores and buy whatever you want. We want it all. But the one thing that is needful, what is the one thing that is needful? We want that too. But, it's always a struggle, and you're raising kids and they're going to go to their proms and they're going to go to this and that and the other thing. They want to drive your car and they want to dress a certain way and you're fighting with them or what's going to happen. We're all in the trenches in the same way, trying to bring our faith to reality in a fuller way, but at the same time, we're struggling every day with this situation that we find ourselves here with all of the distractions, with the cell phones, with the internet. It's all there. We know what's going on. So anyway, that was a good question. Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, the question is, a lot of people are taking communion, but they're not confessing. But on the other hand, you've heard that receiving communion is good because you never know when the Lord is going to call you home and you should always be prepared. Okay, that's the kind of the idea. Well, on Mount Athos, and even, and generally speaking, we encourage people to go to confession on a regular basis. As a minimum, maybe once a year. If you can do more during the Great Feast, that would be even better. But have a life confession, sit down with your spiritual father, your parish priest, have a life confession one time. And then after that, it doesn't have to be something where you have to keep going, in long sessions with them. You get the basics out of the way with your initial confession, and then you can say in a couple minutes, 5 minutes, you can go to confession and say what you have to say. The important thing here is the fact that the priest, through the church, has the authority to absolve the sins. That's the difference. We're not Protestants. Yes, you say, well, I can go directly to God. I don't need the priest. I can just ask, well, that's good too, to help, to kind of get you ready. But the sacramental confession is really important. So if there's something that's been holding you back, it's okay. Find a spiritual father. Go to your parish priest. Go to a monastery and have, a serious talk with somebody. And then once you do the basic, then you can, every so often try to, that's what we would encourage. So it is really important. Again, that's a very good question as well. Yes. Yeah. The importance of a spiritual father. Yes. It is important because we all need guides in our lives. And the thing is that having someone who's there you can use as a sounding board, as a someone who's a good listener, someone who knows what your struggle is all about, someone who will be praying for you, someone who can guide you on the path of salvation. You have that kind of like person in your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be your parish priest, but often it will be. It could be another priest from another parish, or it could be an abbot from a monastery. It can vary. But the idea is that you're accountable to somebody. We should all have in our lives at least one person that we know that we can be fully transparent to. Even one person. It might be a dear friend in the beginning, it could be someone like that. Someone you can just sit down and talk to. I need to talk to you, something, in my life. And then, you can go to confession. But I think that's important, that we should have at least somebody that we can share our innermost thoughts, our being with in that kind of an intimate way. It's a good thing. And the idea of confession, of course, is for us to find somebody with whom we can share some of the difficult struggles that we're encountering in the course of our lives. It's a good thing. But if we're on islands unto ourselves, trying to do it all by ourselves, living only for ourselves, and just kind of taking the approach, well, I've got my icons at home, I can pray before them, what do I need the church for? What do I need the priest for? Well, Orthodox Christianity is communitarian. That's what we're all about. We're not about the one. We're about the many. The Orthodox Church is a church of fellowship, of community, of communion, of a sacramental life. That's what we're all about. Two or more gathered in the name of Christ. So that's why it's such important to have that somebody that that you can be open with and say, this is who I am. And whoever that might be. Hopefully you can eventually make it to your parish priest, but I think it's important that we all need at least one person that we can be open with. So, yes.
So, continuing on these two discussions of spiritual father, in your experience as a confessor, when people have come to you or when parishioners come to you, as lay people, what is a good prayer rule? And I know that there's a variation on it, but do you prescribe a typical prayer rule for a lay person, a married one, a single person? And is there differentiation if they're preparing to receive communion? How do you manage that? And then comparing that with any examples of Elder Ephraim's examples.
Okay, so you're asking me what are my recommendations for prayer rules for people that come to me for confession and how that might differ, let's say, from Elder Ephraim. But Elder Ephraim had a very simple thing that he would tell people. He would say, I remember, I can hear his voice in my ear right now, prosevchi proi kevradi, prayer in the morning and in the evening. One chapter of scripture a day, go to confession, and he very simple. So in the beginning, he was just basically read the scriptures, maybe one chapter a day, prayer in the morning, prayer at night, and then and I'll talk about this later on in more detail about the Jesus prayer. Put a lot of emphasis on that. He would give everybody a prayer rope, a little prayer rope when they would come to see him for confession, as a little, something that would have a reminder of him. But those are the things. He kept it kind of simple. If there was somebody more advanced, maybe who was already deeply committed into the Orthodox Church, he might be a little more, challenge them a little more.
But prayer in the morning and prayer at night is pretty vague.
Yeah. Yeah, they're use the ones from the prayer books that have, morning prayer, evening prayer. Like the Orthodox Study Bible has prayer for the morning, they have prayer for the evening. There's some prayer books have different occasions you pray for, things like that. So he wasn't real complicated. He wasn't asking them to do something that was out of reach for them, but they could build on that. Yeah.
I have a question, Father.
Oh, yes.
So I visited the St. Anthony's
Yeah.
in Arizona, and I was struck by, during Trapeza, there was a monk reading, I think Psalms, but in Greek. And then, so it made me think, like, Elder Ephraim's viewpoint on, like, was he here to serve, like, the already Orthodox faithful, or was there any kind of evangelization? Like, I was struck sitting there at Trapeza, like, you have all sorts of people there. No one speaks Greek, but it's all in Greek. Like, what was the thought of, was there ever a, let's reach out in English, or was it they're going to absorb and it doesn't matter that it's in Greek? That made me curious about what he was trying to do.
Okay, Jan was saying that when she goes to the monastery in Arizona, that the readings that were done during the time of the mealtime were offered in Greek. And what is the philosophy of the monastery? Are they trying to reach only the people that are able to understand or are Orthodox already, or are they trying to do outreach as well? That's a good question, Jan. I even asked Elder Ephraim about that one time. I said, well, how come we're not using more English, in the services? And he said, oh, they have the other monasteries. They have the one in, Holy Transfiguration. Let them go there, or, he would encourage the other places as well. However, I think the witness of the monasteries, if you go and you talk to the monks, for example, all of the nuns at our monastery, none of them was born in Greece. And most of them never spoke Greek before. But now if you go there, they all speak Greek and they're fluent. I guess that's sort of like, I don't know what to say. It's sort of like, kind of like, it's hard, you learn another language, but they learned it willingly and they're okay with it. I mean, other people might not be okay with it because they really want to understand. And the thing that really draws people, and there is a kind of an evangelism to it, is the holiness of the people. It's beyond the words. The words are important. You can say it in English, of course. And I certainly, at our parishes in Pittsburgh metropolis, almost everything is in English. That's the way it is. But in these monasteries, they kind of keep a certain kind of discipline. And when the services are mainly in Greek, when I go there, sometimes I'll do a retreat there, but I'll do it in English and I'll do the service in English. It's not a problem. But they do have outreach as well. They make an effort to work with people that, when they come for confession and they may not speak Greek. We even had one incident that I could share with you where a woman was Roman Catholic. This is really a funny one here. And she was brought to meet Father Ephraim. She wanted to go to confession. And Father Ephraim stood up. He said, well, he goes to me in Greek. He said, I really can't hear her confession because she's not Orthodox. I said, well, maybe you can give her a blessing. So she sat down and he listened to her and she became a confession. Even though it wasn't supposed to be a confession, it became a confession. And she really opened up to him. And you can tell he was really taking it all in. And finally he goes to me, Αυτή θα γίνει Orthodoxy. She's going to become Orthodox. There was another case of a woman who had a really bad past, so to speak. A lot of struggles, a lot of issues. And because they're so strict, I was really fearful that what he would say to her. And I knew that she was somewhat fragile in her personality. And I was worried. I said, oh my God, what's going to happen to this poor thing if he lays into her, and he gives her this really strict kind of guidance and it's going to really cause her kind of an emotional distress. So I'm holding my breath, waiting to see what's going to happen. So, I'm translating at the same time. So at the end of her confession, a very deep, sincere, open confession, she opened the book of her life up to him. He listened to it all, and I'm waiting to see what's he going to say. He gets up out of his chair. He goes over to the woman. He embraces her, and he says, my dear, I feel your pain. And that was it. It was done. So he knew that he couldn't say anything to her that would, bring her down and humiliate her. He knew that what she needed was the feel of love and the touch of someone who was forgiving. Any other questions? Yes.
What would be things that can be nurturing to people besides besides the wonderful thing of encouraging people to have a prayer room, even if it's a simple one.
Right.
Even if you pray 5 minutes in the morning or 5 minutes in the evening and then build from there. But aside of their individual spiritual lives, what would you recommend for the life of the community in a parish in the world to have things that will begin to foster the spiritual life of the community, both in people's individual lives or even sometimes talking about confession. There are people that their spiritual lives consist solely of maybe coming to church on Sunday, and some of them will come try to figure out what time is communion so that they can come 10 minutes before that. And what would you say, some ideas of how to encourage and foster the development of spiritual lives of a community in the world?
Okay, very good question, Father. What can we do to encourage the spiritual life of the communicants in the parish so that they will be energized and become more committed to their faith? There are a number of things that I could recommend. I think one of them that's really helped a lot. We invite people to come, like the miraculous icon of the Ephraim. They've come to our parish, and we invite people to come, and the church fills up, and people are really blessed by that. There's another well-known icon now that's been gushing myrrh for the last 13 years. There have been many, many miracles in Taylor, Pennsylvania, at the Church of St. George, Carpatho Russian Church, and that icon is incredible. It's the Panagia Cardiotisa that the original was painted at one of our monasteries in the Poconos, the Holy Protection Monastery. That one is also, he comes, Father Mark Leisure, and so that really draws people in. And in fact, it opens up not only to our own members, but brings other people that are not even Orthodox, and they see this miracle before their eyes. And then Father Mark goes around and he carries the icon, and it's so much myrrh coming out of it that he has you cup your hands, and he lets it drip into your hands. And you can put it on your face and be blessed by it. But he's come numerous times. That's one example for what we can do, okay? Have you had any of these icons here at the parish? Oh, okay. So it's okay. Sure. So that's one example. That really helps a lot of people to enliven them in terms of their faith. Obviously, visiting a monastery is another practice where you can, even though you may not be able to, just like with me, when I went for the first time, I didn't know what to expect. But just seeing these people, one example, there was a novice. He's only been to the monastery for 9 months. His name was Prodromos. You could tell he did a lot of metanias because he was had a build like a fullback for the Detroit Lions or the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they told me that he was saying the Jesus prayer so violently that his breath became fragrant. As soon as I heard about that, I said, oh my gosh, the prayer can do that? I got excited. I said, wow, we all should be saying the prayer. Little things like that. Stories from the Church of the Desert Fathers. You can kind of try to judge when you're preaching. Bring in a story like that. People like to hear those. They remember the stories. They don't remember anything else. They'll forget your sermon half an hour after you've given it. But the story that you told, they can remember years later. Oh, Father told that story. Yeah, people remember stories. Things like that. I would say that'd be another way to do it. Open up the parish for more opportunities for kind of fellowship. And every parish, I hope, has a nice core, a strong core of committed people that create a fellowship. And then they, on their own, can begin to reach out and to do things within the community that will draw more people into the circle, so to speak. Not that you want to be the holier than thou people. You don't want to create the impression that you're somebody better than everybody else. But the fact is that every parish has to have those people in it. Committed people like yourselves have come to these kind of retreats, and you're going to go, you're going to talk to people that you know about Elder Ephraim. So Bible studies, of course, needless to say, I'm sure you have fellowship of various types here. The youth work, summer camps are fantastic. We had a weeping icon at our summer camp, in 1988. I was blessed to be there. Should I tell you the story? This was in 1988, the feast day of St. Markella and St. Mary Magdalene, summer camp, 1988. A few hundred kids there at our camp, Camp Nazareth it was called. And one of our priests had an icon, and he wanted me to bless it with the tears from the icon in Chicago of the guiding mother, Panagia Odiyitria. And I kept the vial with the cotton in it, and the cotton had kind of drying out a bit, but I blessed his icon, and the children from the cabins were blessed with the myrrh. And then the following day, the feast day of St. Markella and St. Mary Magdalene, the icon that was blessed began to exude myrrh. It was crying, but the tears were fragrant. So we were about to have our talent show at the camp. The kids were all excited. And one of the counselors ran down to me. She was hysterical. Father John, there's an icon up there at cabin 3 and it's weeping. What are we going to do? We've got this talent show that's about to take place. Kids have been preparing all week for it. And we've got an icon weeping up there. I said, we have to call off the talent show. So everybody went up, and there was the icon. But then other kids came, and they wanted their icons blessed. And more of them started weeping. And before you knew it, the whole campground, outdoors, covered with the myrrh. It was so strong, I was choking on the fragrance, outdoors. We call it the miracle of Camp Nazareth. And that happened, and people were taking these icons home. Their cars were filled with myrrh. Churches were experiencing this renewal from that. So you never know. You try every little bit of everything. You know, when I've been a priest for 51 years. And, you keep trying whatever you can do. Any little thing you can do to kind of encourage a person to become more committed to their faith, whatever it might be, So, Father, you probably know as much as I do, but we do whatever we can, Sure.
Were there any counsels on how to deal with the distraction of electronic devices?
Oh.
Things like that, especially for the youth?
Any counsel as far as dealing with the distraction of the devices that our young people have? And of course, me too. I've got my phone right here. We all have the same distraction. Well, at our summer camps, we don't allow them to bring their phones. They have to leave them. They're not allowed to have them there. So that's one thing we can do there. We have their attention. And as a result of that, we get really good results in terms of young people finding out more about their faith. It makes a big impact. But, it's a matter of a discipline that, everyone has to learn. I have a 2-year-old grandson. He already knows how to use the cell phone. And he, tells me a couple words and he wants the phone and he knows what to press. And all of a sudden, they know more than we do. It's just amazing how quickly they learn. So it takes a lot of discipline to say, no, you can't do that. Get away from your device. They get watching Super Mario or Captain Underpants or, I know all these things because it's all around me. I have 16 grandchildren, so I have to deal with it all the time. But it's hard. I don't have any specific advice to say maybe to limit the use. Try to monitor it. Many schools are trying to not allow children to have their cell phones in school. That probably is happening all over the country. Oh, yes.
Father, I'm just curious if you could explain perhaps what typically is the background of those who wish to become novices or members of a monastic community, and what are the steps or how does one
Sure.
go about to become a monk?
Okay, what is the background of those that wish to consider the monastic calling? And what are the steps in terms of receiving them from the novitiate on forward? Okay, from what I've seen, usually it's a period of about up to 3 years where they'll live at the monastery. They'll be, you know, monitored, guided, helped in terms of their discerning the calling, whether they have it or not, together with the help of the spiritual mother or father, as the case may be. And during this time, they can judge whether or not the person appears to be serious. One of the things about Father Ephraim's monasteries across the board is they don't accept people from other monasteries that have other traditions. They want to start with somebody that's fresh, a blank slate. Because somebody that's floated around, tried this monastery, tried that monastery, may not always be that serious because they're always trying to looking for something better and that doesn't quite work out. So they look for people that are coming there, they're open, they've never had any kind of other sorts of outside of monastic kind of directives given to them. So they just kind of watch them. They have a certain way they get them ready, you know, a certain dress, not what the monks wear or the nuns. And it's a process of monitoring their progress as they go through this period of time. And then eventually, when it appears to be, they appear to be ready, then they will have the ceremony of giving them their monastic garment. But there is a process there. It doesn't happen overnight. I remember hearing one of the abbess at their monastery in Elwood City was one time saying, she says, the people that want to become monks or nuns, they comes and they goes, but they mostly goes. That's what she told us. We got a big kick out of that because, you know, a lot of people come and they try it out. It's not for them and they leave. You know, it's the way it is. Yes.
I wanted to ask a question around Elder Ephraim's position.
More questions about Elder Ephraim, okay?
Yes. So you mentioned how at Mount Athos they were not very open at the beginning to the idea of him becoming a missionary and continuous to open monasteries. And I guess my question is, I have two questions. First, what inspired him to come to the US specifically, and Canada as well, to open monasteries? Why did he feel the need to do it even though everyone stood against it, even his own spiritual fathers? And then the second question is, what kind of criticisms and what kind of struggles did he face when he did that in the US? Because I guess the concept of ascetic and monastic life differs from how we typically go about our life within the church, which is sharing with other people, not being secluded, helping others, trying to go out of our way to become missionaries and evangelize with others, whereas monastic life is a little bit of the opposite, where you are more stern and sticking to very strict, rigid rules that revolve around a very close relationship with God that requires seclusion. So I guess how did he balance the criticism that might come from society that says monastic life is more almost like they could have called it selfish for being
Right.
centered around your personal relationship with God rather than helping others? Did he have to justify himself? Did he have to also struggle with keeping with his monastic rules within a more evangelized context?
Okay, the question is a very good one about the struggle between going out into the world and evangelizing and helping people in their need versus staying in a monastery in a secluded setting and not having very much contact with the world. And how do you justify the monastic life vis-a-vis the needs of the world? And I think you'll see in the introduction that I gave you here, the Father Ephraim is trying to explain that very thing to his the monastic community, and he says, you know, I recognize your needs, spiritual and otherwise. I don't overlook them, but at the same time, he goes on to say, let us recognize the needs of the brethren who are so far away and so impoverished. So here he's going through the struggle himself, and he's trying to justify it and explain it to the brotherhood, this very vibrant, powerful monastery of Philotheo that he himself helped to repopulate, with all these monks living there and having this wonderful spiritual existence. So he explains it this way. Listen to what he says. Whatever Christ gains there, referring to America, is also your gain. He gives the example of the humble widow of the Bible who gave from her poverty more than those who gave from their abundance, was praised by the Lord because her sacrifice was greater. So he used the example of the widow, and she is heralded as having given more. So he says the monks, we're poor as monks, but look how much we gain if we do something to help other people. Just like the widow who gave her 2 coins, So the monks who feel the loss of the elder will gain all the more for what they sacrifice, but by allowing him to do what he does. So they're giving something up that's costing them a lot, almost everything, you might say, because when you have a spiritual father like Ephraim, you never want to lose him. You've dedicated your life because that man is your spiritual father. You don't want anything to do with him not being in your life. He is like the reason why you came to this monastery. He was the one that inspired you. He's your father. You left your family behind, your mother, your father, your cousins, your friends. You left all of that behind because of this spiritual father. And now all of a sudden, he's up and leaving and going to America to save the world. But so he's torn in these directions himself, and he's trying to explain it. He gives example. You can read that in the little introductory paper that was prepared for you. It's all there, the explanation. But I think we have to remember this. Father Ephraim was a disciple of the elder Joseph. From upon his first arrival as a 19-year-old boy, under the spiritual guidance for the next 12 years of the elder Joseph, very strict, disciplined, ascetic, living in caves, sleeping on wet floors, eating practically nothing, food with worms in it. They did it all. But they were purifying themselves. They were strengthening themselves in their faith. And they lived that way for a period of time, like the elder Joseph and many others. They lived that way. But some of them saw what was going on outside in the world, and it bothered them. Not all of them, but it bothered them, and they said, I've got to do something. Those people out there, they're perishing. What can I do? And so we call it, they leave the comfort of the monastery and they go out into the marketplace. And this is a movement of many of the great saints of the church. First, they find Christ in themselves. And like Saint Seraphim of Sarov said, acquire the Holy Spirit, and thousands around you will be saved. And that's kind of the motto of the monastic community. But you've got to find it first in yourself. And they really put a lot of emphasis on that. Don't try to save the world if you haven't saved yourself yet, if you haven't found Christ and deepened your relationship with Him. But once you have, then your influence will be great. So some people are being called, and now more and more than ever, spiritual fathers are going out into the world and are visiting communities and are preaching and teaching. So we're seeing more of this happening. But as I mentioned to you earlier, Mount Athos was in a decline in the 60s. There were just very few left. The monasteries were idiorhythmic. In other words, they were the idiorhythmic people were allowed to have possessions. And other than praying together, they could, kind of like have their own things the way they wanted. And Father Ephraim said was changing these monasteries into communal ones where they weren't allowed to have property of their own. They had to hold everything in common. And that's where all the monasteries now have been converted to cenobitic. They're all places and that's a change. But again, the monks are going out more, but you should never go out if you're not ready. You've got nothing to offer if you're still struggling with your own faith, if it hasn't been really firmly implanted in you. So I think they're trying to do both, but some have been called to go out into the world like St. Cosmas that I mentioned earlier. Tremendous impact. Father Ephraim, and there are others that are going out and having the same effect. But it's a very good question. There's always going to be that controversy. On Mount Athos, they pray for the world every day. Did you know that on Mount Athos, there are 200 liturgies every day being celebrated? Every single day, they're praying for the world. That's like a tremendous powerhouse of prayer. So, and miracles are happening all the time. So, anyway, great question. Oh, yes.
I have met Elder Ephraim.
Oh, you have. You met Elder Ephraim. Yes.
Now, you have heard a lot of confessions.
Yes, I have.
Why would Elder Ephraim tell somebody you cannot take communion after you confess?
Okay.
I'm sure you.
Why would Elder Ephraim tell someone you can't take communion after you've confessed? I guess it all depends what the nature of the confession was. If there was something that was going on in that person's life that may have been an issue, that maybe have been a cause for, maybe a period of time for, maybe there was a penance given, epithemia, a penance. And the penance might be to wait a certain amount of time until you do begin to take confession again, to a communion. So sometimes they'll give you a penance. They call it in Greek epithemia, and because the monks are stricter than we are in the parishes. If somebody has committed some sort of a crime, whatever it might be, and they need more time, the purpose of the epithemia or the penance is for that person to find healing within themselves, to feel that they have come to grips with what they did and they have truly, deeply repented, then they can receive again. But sometimes they do that. They give you an epithemia, and the church canons are sometimes rather strict. We don't always apply them with the strictness that is there. We use more like the dispensation, or you call it in Greek, economia, so that we try to see the person like that woman that came. That I told you about, that I thought was worried, what was he going to say to her? He forgave her everything. Everything that she said. There's a lot of bad stuff in there by our standards. But his forgiveness was immediate for her. He knew he couldn't burden her with anything. But somebody else, maybe who has the ability to withstand the penance, needs to have that at the point they are in their spiritual lives. It all depends on the circumstances, what the nature is of the confession, and it's the call of the spiritual father to make that call. But everybody eventually will be received back, unless they've denied the faith, unless they're not going to repent from what they're doing. They're going to keep doing it or something like that. So it all depends on the circumstances.
A friend of mine, the same time, went to Athos. He also told her she can't take communion.
Okay, so I don't know the circumstance. So Paisios, I don't know what the circumstance is. Would have to know more. Yeah.
They have services.
Right.
And they have
Mm-hmm.
services, and during the service, this lady comes up to me. It was dark, and says, today, you can go and take communion. Same day that he had told me I cannot. So I tell my husband, George, let's go. Take communion. This lady knows. So we went into communion. Now I'm thinking, was Panagia came to me and told me it's okay to go get communion? Or was it this lady that she knew about me going into Ephraim, Elder Ephraim? Was it that lady? Because there's an area where the ladies sit and the lady escorts each person. Was it her that came to us and told us to go take communion? Or was it Panagia? But Ephraim told me I cannot. It was during Easter time.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the thing.
She says a day after day,
Yeah.
you go take communion.
Well, we know the prayer of St. John Chrysostom that we read. Unfortunately, it's often read after communion. where everyone is invited to come forward, whether they fasted or not, no matter what they've done, But it should be read before communion, so that people on Pascha can all receive. But there is that grace during the bright week that people can commune without having the fear of doing something wrong. So, but without knowing the circumstances, if you came to me and you'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Okay, we're good? Are we? Yes. How important is the prayer? That's the the Jesus prayer. The Jesus prayer, oh, what can I say about that? Oh my goodness. What would we do without that prayer? We can say it anywhere, at any time, driving your car, on the airplane, lying in bed, even in church. To invoke the name of Jesus is to call upon the greatest power ever conceived by man, given to us by God, to invoke the name of his Son, and that name on our lips opens up for us paradise. As St. Isaac the Syrian says, he says, descend into your heart, go into your heart with the prayer of Jesus on your lips, descend into your heart, and there you will find the ladder with the steps that lead you up to paradise. So the prayer is like in our Orthodox Church, and I'll say more about it later when we have our second session, about how important the prayer is of Jesus and the effect that it has on people's lives. Say it all the time. It's the prayer that distinguishes us in our faith, because with it, we may not be great theologians. We may not be clergy or monastics, but anybody can say the prayer and call on the name of Jesus. And with that prayer on our lips and in our hearts, the world is ours. It's open to us. God gives us all his grace through that prayer. Amen, sister. We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's wonderful.
Thank you very much. God bless you all. We'll meet again after the show. For sure, yeah.